Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lunch and Lunch and Learn, we'll be starting just shortly. So stand by, and we'll let the system get connected for everybody. There'll be some people joining us shortly. So thanks for coming in today and taking time from your day to visit with us about our program. So we're getting our screen set up to share with you, so we'll be starting shortly. Well, for some reason, the screen sharing is not working properly. It doesn't appear on our monitors. So we will, if it does not materialize here shortly, we will provide this on a replay later today. And let's see. So the keynote presentation is processing now, and it's a little bit of a low slag today, so we'll wait just another minute to see how many people join us. We published a poll this morning on LinkedIn asking for your feedback in terms of getting new people to join us, there we go. Ask new people we are asking people what would be the best day. We started off at 11:30 a.m. On Thursdays, but if there is a better day for you, then check out the poll at John G. Self on LinkedIn. So let's get started today and talk about what our key, the key issues that are facing us in terms of today's agenda. We're going to provide a layoff update. Secondly, we'll then get into avoiding common mistakes in the resumes. And then third, Ask the Recruiter, which is a takeoff of a column I used to write when I was an executive recruiter. And so today we use that as a well, let's see, it's not showing up here, so I apologize. It's not changing on the monitors, so okay, there we go. We're getting it to move forward now, and I apologize for the technical glitches. So the things we're going to talk about today. We're going to provide a layoff update. We're going to talk about avoiding common mistakes, and then we're going to talk about Ask the Recruiter, as I just explained. That was a popular column we had in our post several years ago. I'm no longer a recruit. I do not miss the travel. I enjoyed the work significantly. Over the years, I worked in 6 different countries on 4 different continents, and so, my goal in life is never to get on another airplane if I can help it. All right, so let's really talk initially about the layoff rate. We've had one big news release this week. Amazon is starting a reduction in force of about 10,000 workers initially. This is in response to changing economic conditions. They hired a lot of people and built out a lot of warehouses during the pandemic, and then when the pandemic slowed, they decided they no longer needed that level of support, and so the person running that division is no longer with the company, and they're now making some changes. I think that what you're beginning to see is that before this is said and done, the job losses before the Fed is able to get inflation under control is going to be probably 1 million to 1.5 million, or it could be more, depending on how deep the recession is. Keep in mind, when the Fed gets involved trying to cut back on inflation, which this morning in London is 11%. Okay, we think it's high in the U.S. at an effective rate of 7.9%. It's 11% in London. This is a global recession. It's a global problem, not just a U.S. problem. But as they try to reduce that rate, and the Fed target is below 2%, they have to raise interest rates. That's the only tool they have, and of course, there's a lag effect. So you keep raising it. Hopefully, you don't push it too far because you don't want to drive the economy into a depression. And so it's a very risky way to control inflation, but it's the only tool they have. But jobs are going to continue to be cut. Particularly, this morning's update said that the Great Resignation, where everybody really was able to find a job pretty easily, that's over. The jobless to job ratio is still 1.9 job vacancies to every job, or every person in the marketplace. So while that is still favorable and it will allow us to absorb some of these layoffs, to a certain extent, that's going to balance out pretty quickly. You're going to see continued increases now in Indiana, Georgia, Kentucky, Florida, and Texas. The new jobless claims this morning were offset by notable increases in Minnesota and North Carolina. And interest-sensitive companies that really their business model works on their interest rate, they're already beginning to see some significant declines. The jobless claims this week were about 4,000. That's comparable to previous job losses in the pre-pandemic era. But anyway, the most important thing is that the total number of job losses that will probably occur before inflation is controlled is going to be probably north of 1 million, in the 1.25 million to 1.5 million range, and it could be higher. Okay, we ran a blog earlier this week, a video blog talking about recruiting scams to guard your personal information. And I've gotten several questions about that. And what can I do? I mean, you told me what type of fraud they run. How can I be sure that the recruiter is the real meal deal? Well, the first thing you need to do is ask the recruiter, tell me a little bit about your company, how long you've been recruiting. And these are legitimate questions you should ask. Okay, don't be shy. Ask about the company, then ask, is this the first assignment you've done for this client? And if they say no, now then ask questions. Tell me about the client. You don't have to give me the name, but tell me what kind of organization it is. Some people in the past, when you start asking those level of questions, you get disconnected, and that's when you know it's fraud. But a really good recruiters, a contingency recruiter that doesn't have an exclusive agreement, so he's trying to protect he wants to get that deal done before somebody else comes along and poaches his client. He's not going to tell you a lot of information about the client. And if it's in an area where it would be easily to identify the client, he's going to be very cagey. So don't rule it out just based on the recruiter's caginess trying to protect his confidentiality. But then if that's the case, what you can do is to say, okay, great. Well, have you seen my LinkedIn profile? And if he says yes, and say, okay, would you mind sharing your LinkedIn profile with me? Or you can just don't ask for that, just go look it up. Now, keep in mind that a lot of people who use common names in these scams, you're going to find a bunch of people, but you look for the person's name and the company. Recruiters, legitimate recruiters, are extremely aggressive about promoting themselves and promoting their brand. So if this person does not have a LinkedIn profile, that's a red flag, okay? Secondly, look up the company's name. If they don't have a website, then that's a huge red flag. And if they do have a website, go into the company and find out, is this person work there? If they don't list the names of their recruiters, then call the company and just say, great, I got a call from a recruiter about this job, and I was just kind of curious, is this person work for you? Now, so those are some of the things you can do. LinkedIn is a great way to do it without having to make that phone call to the recruiting agency. But if they start asking for personal information, regarding background information, to do a background check, that is never done on the front end of a search. Now that process may change as companies go to more automation, but I can tell you that is a risky proposition, trying to get people to give up information on the front end. So do not give out private information. Check out the recruiter before you give them any information. Look them up on LinkedIn, look them up on Instagram, look them up on Facebook, look up their company webpage on the web, and just check them out. So those are some additional ideas for you to follow. Let's talk about your resume now. This is a huge issue. Historically, it has always been considered your first interview. Now that's going to change some because there's some developments occurring in automation with AI, with artificial intelligence. This is only going to accelerate over the next 5 to 7 years. If you are in your late 50s, early 60s, and you're getting ready to retire, this is really not going to affect you that significantly unless you get laid off today. But it is something that if you are a Z, millennial, or a late stage Gen X, you're going to be dealing with for this the rest of your career. So you might as well adjust. Today, AI has only been primarily used to screen resumes. So when you apply for a job online and you submit it through the portal, that resume 99% of the time is being screened by a computer. The recruiter never sees your resume unless the computer spits it out and says, this is one candidate that meets the criteria, has a high scan score, you should talk to them. In effect, that's what the computer's saying. 8 out of 10 resumes submitted in this fashion are never seen by a human being. It's significant now to talk about sourcing because they're beginning to use this automation in sourcing, and we're going to talk about that more in early December when we come back from the Thanksgiving break. But this is game-changing. 3, the selection process. The human factor is going to be reduced in recruiting. So your resume and building a career network is going to be absolutely two critical items that you have to really perfect and develop, and it's got to be best in class. This is going to have a significant impact if you are in those groups that I said earlier, late stage, Gen X, millennials, or Gen Z. This is going to have a significant impact on your career, so you're going to have to adapt. Professional networking is going to be absolutely critical as the process moves forward. People, it's going to be done more by machines. So having someone who will speak out for you, recommend you, and extend your resume, we're trying to extend the resume. We're just getting alerts that they're having some technical problems with Restream, probably with LinkedIn, because we're monitoring it on YouTube. But it is available. As this moves forward, you're going to have somebody who goes in to the job manager and says, "Look, I know Jill, I know John. He's a good guy. Here's his resume. I've really been impressed with what he's accomplished." That human factor, somebody who will be your spokesperson, somebody who will be your advocate, is absolutely going to be critical. And because you can't have enough contacts for jobs across the United States, you need to be more specific and target the jobs. Okay, let's now talk about common mistakes in resume. First of all, one of the biggest mistakes, and we call it common mistake number one, is that the applicant fails to comprehend their value. They don't really think about it. Well, I'm experienced, that's my value. And until they don't really even think about it until they get brought into the picture and somebody says, "Tell me about yourself," or "Why do you want to work for us?" Or, but more importantly, "Tell me about yourself." That's a value question. They're asking for your value. So if you haven't thought this through, if you haven't gone through the exercise to identify and build a value brand statement or your value proposition, thinking about your strengths and your accomplishments that will support that, you're in trouble. And it's going to affect the quality of your resume. We can look at a resume, and if it's really focused on what this job we're looking for, we know that they have given thought to their value. When you don't do this, it really diminishes the focus of your resume, and it limits the effectiveness of your ability to sell yourself in an interview and on the resume. The common mistake number two is design and content. Now, this is really important. In the early days, resumes, they designed them beautifully because all the resumes were being reviewed by individuals, and they did research, and resume writers did a marvelous job in trying to put together formats and content that would be appealing to a job, the hiring authority or the recruiter. Well, today, that's being done by a recruiter, and the recruiter doesn't care what your resume looks like. So don't spend a lot of money on designing a fancy resume. Don't get too cute by half and develop a multi-column resume, because unless you are a really good design person and really know how to do that stuff really, really well, when you start customizing your resume, which you must do for every position, you're going to throw off your formatting. So make it simple, clean and simple. In fact, we recommend that our clients submit initially a plain text resume. The computer doesn't care, and I will tell you, your content initially is much more important than how it looks. So, common mistake number three is inconsistent formatting. You fail to explain your employer and your scope of responsibility. That's important. Recruiters and hiring authorities, they want to know, okay, what is this company? I've never heard of them. What does this person do? That's important because you're being evaluated based on relevant experience. So you need to be able to show that you're working for a company that's in the universe of who the employer is. So you need to be sure you do that. That is a very common mistake. People omit that, and that's a problem. And they'll put their job title, and then they don't say what they do. what they were responsible for. That is critical. That is a disqualifying point right there. And then what people typically do is then that they will describe their job, scope of responsibility, in bullet points or the dot points beneath that. And that's not what those are for. Those are for your quantifiable achievements. You should never mix scope of responsibility statements for accomplishments. For example, I supervised 100 people and a budget of $12 million. That's not an accomplishment. That's a scope of responsibility. We want that should go under your job in a tightly 3 or 4 sentence description. Then use the dot points for your accomplishments, and do that with every job listing. It's sometimes we'll go through a resume and they'll do it right the first time, and then they'll do it 2 or 3 other ways in subsequent submissions. So that's really a significant issue. It's inconsistent formatting, and you're not providing us the relevant information that we need. What you did is important what you did is important. But employers are hiring for value. They're hiring for what you accomplished. So you do not want to detract from your accomplishments by intermingling scope of responsibility statements in your dot point. Keep those in a short sentence under your job title of what you were responsible for. You don't have to get into detail, but you have to write it in a way that covers the waterfront, and certainly in a way that touches on what the job summary said, because that's what the computer's looking for. Common mistake number 4, formatting is not conducive to customization. Again, I touched on this briefly a few minutes ago. If you have a 2-column or I've seen 3, but you get a really pretty looking resume that a resume writer has prepared for you, and then you have to go through and start changing some things and reorganizing some things, you'd be surprised how quickly the formatting can get screwed up. And most people, most scanning systems prefer that you submit with a DocX, Microsoft Word format today. Used to be PDF because that would lock in your formatting, but today it's a DocX. So you're constantly dealing in that regard. Specifically address elements like the type of experience, accomplishments, academic degrees, professional accreditations, or licensures. You need to be sure you put that in. Don't assume that the client or the employer is going to figure this out, because if you're asking them to come up with the right answer after doing the math, they don't. And somebody said, well, why do I need to customize? If you don't customize, if you're not using the keywords, etc., that are in the job summary, you're not going to get a high scan score. So common mistake number 6 is that you use a career objective versus the professional summary statement. Career objectives are totally out of bounds now. You should never, ever use one, because it's either going to be too specific and get you eliminated, or it's going to be too general to be of any value to you or the hiring authority. So use a professional summary that touts your value. And now we get back to that the importance of understanding your value. That touts your value using the keywords and phrases and some of the descriptive words and some of the requirements of the job in that professional summary. If you've done 95 or 100% of everything they mention in the survey, you need to mention that I've covered each one of the required functions in the job summary. It should mirror the job summary: keywords, phrases, requirements, and accomplishments. That's really important. Now, you can't just upgrade the professional and customize the professional summary, because if you just dump everything in that and don't change the rest of your resume, it's not going to be very beneficial. It's called a scan dump, and they don't grade you very highly for that. Do not assume the employer will figure it out. As I've said before in the past, I once had a guy who we were working on a project in Pennsylvania. We had unions involved in the hospital. There were some contentious union negotiations, it was Washington, and the person had worked in Pennsylvania, had worked in several other cities in Chicago. But they didn't respond that they'd had union experience. So that was critical for our employer, and we had a lot of resumes. So we used that as one of the keys to kick people out. Well, the person got really upset and said, well, why didn't you call me and ask me? And my response was, how would I know that you had union experience? You didn't mention it. Well, why didn't you call me? Because I can't call 200 people that don't have a good resume. And most of the resumes that are coming in are average. So it's important that you don't assume anything, okay? Common mistake number 7, applicants with prior relevant work experience placing academic credentials at the top of the resume. Unless you're a new graduate, your academic credentials should go to the bottom. Now, when you're finishing your graduate degree, you may have 7 to 10 years experience, but say you're a late bloomer and you get an MBA, the career office wants you to put it at the top because they want everybody to see where you got your degree. And you may have to do that. That may be a requirement for you to go to their job fair, but it's total nonsense. It's absolute BS. They don't know what they're talking about. You want to put it, if you're a new graduate with not a lot of relevant experience, put it at the top because that's one of your strong selling points. But at the bottom, it may be a requirement, but you need to put it at the bottom because I'm not hiring your degrees as much as I'm hiring your accomplishments and your experience. That's really important. Another common mistake, number 8, references available on request. We see that statement all the time on resumes for even people who've been in the job market 20, 25 years. It's unnecessary and it shows your inexperience or lack of knowledge. Don't do that. It's assumed that you have references, okay? So don't put that on there because that's sort of a tip-off that you may not be as sophisticated or as experienced as you're trying to represent. Number 9, unless the employer requests a PDF format, use the Microsoft DocX Word program. When you submit the program, and if it's not submitted with the correct format or one that the computer can easily read, then it's going to get screwed up, it's going to get eliminated, you're never going to know why you didn't get a call back, and the employer's never going to know that you submitted a resume at all. Yes, they do have logs of the resumes that came in, but who's going to go? Nobody goes and looks at those. So, look for directions on submitting. If it doesn't ask for a cover letter, don't send one because it's going to confuse the scanner. Secondly, if they don't mention what format to use Microsoft Word DocX. That's one of the newer versions of Word. And that's pretty safe today. Now, in the old days, yes, you would use PDF because that locked in your formatting. But again, if you submit a resume in a plain text, then if this computer likes you, the computer's going to look at it and go, well, the recruiter's going to look at it and go, well, that's not a very good resume, but they're going to, because you scan well, they're probably going to call you. And when they call you, that's when you say, oh, by the way, I've just updated my format and I'd like to send you a new version of my resume. And then if you use video email, then you can follow that up with a video email and differentiate yourself in the market. Okay, those are some of the top common mistakes, and they're easily fixed. And check. We have a very in-depth course at johnGself.com on the resume. It's online and it's an affordable price. So if you have questions, check that out. If you can always schedule a call with me. I'm happy to answer your questions. But we have the course answers all of your questions and in great detail. Okay, so let's talk some of the questions that have come in prior to the start of our show today. First, how can I research culture of a potential employer? That's a great question. Thank you, Jim. Let me tell you something. We've got a course. It's free online at johnGself.com that'll tell you how to diagnose corporate culture. But here's some top points. Number 1, you always should be asking questions in an interview. It's not a one-way exchange. It's sharing information. Ask the person, particularly the hiring authority or the HR, anybody from HR, tell me what it's like to work here, or tell me about the culture. Sometimes you can ask maybe a supervisor or a manager, tell me about the culture, and it kind of confuses them because they don't know what to say. Just say, what do you like about working here? If you had some things to change about working here, what would you change? Ask, what's the turnover rate? What happened to the last person in this job? Why did they leave? it, but the turnover rate's critical. If they got a high turnover rate, then the culture may be toxic, and you got to be careful. You also, this is when your contacts come in. This is when the professional network is just incredibly invaluable. They can tell you they can tell you a lot of times about what's going on within the organization, and that's really important for you to know. So ask questions. And check out the free course, Diagnosing the Corporate Culture, at johngself.com. Best answer you've ever heard about ageism. A hospital CEO that I know was interviewing in Alabama, and he was getting his second or third interview, and he was sitting around the table with the board, and unfortunately the board members were trying to make a decision that day, and so the other two applicants were sitting out in the reception room. Now, you really should never do that to an applicant. Let them see their competitors. I mean, that's really bad form, but that's what they were doing. And he, the applicant that I was coaching said, I was clearly the oldest one, and he said, and the guy who asked me the question was 80 years old. And in essence, the question was, do you have the energy and the know-how to do this job, since you seem to be about 62 to 65 years old? And he had been dreading that question, but said, okay, I've got to have an answer. He said, well, thank you for raising the question about the elephant in the room. I am 64 years old, he said, and I will tell you, I have more experience, I'm more successful, and I have more energy than those other two whippersnappers out there. And everybody at the table laughed. Ronald Reagan, famously in a debate with Walter Mondale, when they were asking him about his ability to do the very demanding job of being president, he said, well, I want to say this about age. I will not allow my opponent's age and inexperience to be a factor in this campaign. So sometimes if you think about what you want to say on one of those questions and it's funny, it can really work out. I've used this example before. You get the question about your experience and your weaknesses, and everybody hates that question. And one guy said, well, maybe we better call my wife first. And everybody in the boardroom laughed when he did that. And then people got more engaged because they thought, we like this guy. Let's see. What is one of the best questions that you can ask in a job interview as an applicant? Tell me what success looks like in 180 days and in a year. And I say 180 days because 40 to 45% of everybody recruited from outside the organization usually is gone within 18 months or 18 to 24 months. So, you want to say 6 months and a year, and just say, what is success going to look like? Spell it out for me in some detail. And that's important for you. Okay, we're running out of time. I appreciate you joining us today. This will be available later on our website and on our YouTube channel, and we hope you'll join us. Now, we'll be off next week because it is the Thanksgiving holiday, and my wife would probably shoot me if I were in here trying to do lunch and learn, and nobody would be watching anyway. So we will be off next week. We will be back, I think it's December the 1st. And let me know what days and what time of the day is best for you. In the meantime, take care. We enjoyed working with you today, and visit our website. If you have a lot of questions about your career, if you're getting ready to start a job search, you can schedule a free call with me. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Go to our website, johnggself.com, go to the bottom of the page and click the button, Talk to John, and you'll get it. You can schedule a free call. And if you want to look at our course collection, check the button on the right side of the page, and for our courses, it'll take you to our education site, and we have a lot of free courses as well as some affordably priced, more in-depth offerings. So thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you soon.